Hey everyone, welcome back to the studio. It is Flower Farm Day. So we're working on, well, it's June, so this is our 6th month working on the flower farm. And I've got the blocks behind me. I apologize for not getting it out last week. It's always on the second Tuesday of the month. I had a little ailment with my toe, so I had a little procedure done. And I had some guests here, so we really couldn't quite get a handle on getting that done. But the blocks are behind me and we're ready to go. And I've got some good content coming up as well. But let's get our flower farm done. So today on Flower Farm Month 6, I'm going to be working straight out of the book. Our first block is block number 5. It's called the Dahlia block. It's behind my head right here. This one right here is our Dahlia block. And it can look all kinds of different ways depending on your fabric choices. I'm going to show you what my fabric choices are. You can sort of see it on the wall. So it makes a really big impact. And that is going to be block number 5. So we're catching up now in this series with block 5 and block 6. I know we've jumped around a little bit to get some of those smaller things done, but we're now in month 6 of the year. So we're getting 5 and 6 done. And then, of course, as we get down towards the end of the book, we're going to have a lot of those smaller things already completed. So block number 5, the Dahlia block, is on page 26 in the book. I have it over here on the side. We need 5 fabrics for that one. And this is a 16-inch block. Actually, both 5 and 6 are 16-inch blocks, so the blocks are getting a little bit smaller. Also, we're making 2 of each. So this month is a 4-block month, and very, very doable. You can see behind me, these are much more, they're not like the big ones anymore. They're starting to get a little bit more reasonable. 16 inches is a little bit more reasonable size block, and making 2 is pretty simple. So because the block sizes are getting a little more reasonable and the number is still staying at 2, we can use a little bit lighter fabric. So most of the fabrics were a fat quarter or less, most of. And our second block, which is over my shoulder here, is going to be block number 6. And I believe you pronounce it Gentian, Gentian. That's the Gentian block. It is on page 28. None of these blocks have a lot of steps, but they do have a couple of things that I want you to watch out for. And that is those, one side of the part is at one angle and one side is at the other angle. So we're going to talk about that. So if you want to look at the things that I think you should watch out for, why don't you stick around? We'll walk through our fabric requirements or our fabric choices and what that means for the block. And then we'll walk through the steps of the block. So stick around. Let's get started. Oh boy, now we can get started on our block. Let's start looking at the fabric choices that I made for block number 5, which is our Dahlia block. Okay, so I have both blocks here. I'm just going to move this one out of the way a little bit. We can concentrate on this one over here. So as you can see, there are 5 different fabrics here. Let me move that string so it doesn't look weird. There are 5 different fabrics here, and I have divided the parts into different sections. And I have already made a block, so I've shifted them around a little bit. But basically, fabric number 1, which requires about a fat quarter, as well as number 2 and number 3 in this block. So I think we need like a fat 1/8, so something a little bit smaller. So what was great about this block is, you know, I'm working out of my fat quarter bundle, and so I had my box, my little art bin box here of all of our organized fat quarters. So you can see some of them are still folded into fat quarters, but as I've been making the blocks, I have used part of them. So you can look, for example, at this piece right here. This was a fat quarter. Now it's a little closer to a fat 1/8 or something like that. So if blocks are calling for a fat 1/8, I still have stuff left over. So I have little bits and pieces in here. I have extra strips in here. Everything that's left over, even though I still have fat quarters in here, is all getting kept in this box, because as I start to get into the smaller blocks and my needs for fabric requirements are smaller, I can use up some of these bits and bobs. So for fabric number 1 in the block, number 1 is that center star area. So if you can look at it on the wall, whoops, right here, this big strong star looking part right here is fabric number 1. So that one I wanted to be the boldest. That's the darkest of the fabrics in our list. And fabric number 2, which shows up in the book as a teal, is the next darkest down. And I'm trying to shade them because in the book they show as sort of a dark teal, medium teal, light teal. That's kind of how I wanted to do them in my pattern as well. So this is fabric 1, this is fabric 2, coming off of that. Fabric 3 in the book was like a green, so it did kind of flow with that teal a little bit. So I wanted mine to be sort of a different bold color. So I chose the red. That kind of ties the red in here. And then fabric 4 is what we needed the most of, aside from the background, because it's almost always the background that we need the most fabric. We needed close to a ½ yard of that. So I chose a print that I had yardage of, and then I also did that for fabric number 4. So let's look at that one up close. So fabric number 4 was some yardage that I had in my stash. It's a paisley design. It has this little bit of taupe in here as well, but it's definitely dark blue, dark red, and the lighter blue. So I thought they all kind of communicated together. So I added that in as this was supposed to be sort of a small scale floral is what it shows in the book. So this is my small scale floral. It does not have a light background color. It's just a small scale floral. So what that did is, because my floral was very strong, I have this very, very strong rounded look to the block, which is great. This is Flower Farm, so it's supposed to be, I guess, some sort of resemblance to a flower. And I think it does look pretty cool. It looks like a flower petal with like a real heavy stamen sort of coming out of the center. So if you want something that is a little bit lighter, that doesn't draw your attention to how circular this block becomes, you might want to do something that's a little less bold. I'm fine with it. I liked the idea of utilizing this. I think it's a Waverly print that I found in my stash, and it's very different from the other prints. Even though it blends really nicely and all the colors are there, it's a little bit dustier, a little bit more muted than some of the other colors. So it gives it kind of a different vibe, and it is very print specific. It's very, what do I want to say? Very busy. So it gives a little bit different vibe to the block. And I like how it sits in the center as well. So I think being in the center of the block, it really shows you how all the colors are in there. They're in that fabric. So I like that idea. So I went ahead and I cut all the parts for this block, and then we'll go ahead and sew some of them together so that you can see where some of the issues that I had in the blocks. Let's look at the second block, block number 6, which is the Gentian block, and we'll look and see what we chose for those fabrics. All right, here are the fabrics that I have for the Gentian block. And again, very bold in differences in color. The block or fabric number 1 was really just a deep plain block, and they show fabric number 2 as a dark background floral. So it has a very dark background, but it does have a floral to it, so it had a little bit more color to it. I chose this as my fabric number 2, so it does have color, but it's still a very dark, dark background. So you can see that it has some color to it, but it doesn't contrast really heavily with the rest of the block, and that's okay. That's kind of how I wanted it to be. Fabric number 3 is our center square. So I chose this nice light center square. It's got a little bit of green in it because I chose that apple. That's a yardage that I had that I mixed in. And then fabric 4 is little squares that sort of come out from the center. Let's take a look at it. So this fabric right here is the one that's going to sort of come out from the center. And I wanted that to be different because now the block, since I have this really dark blue and I have another pretty dark blue in that area where the floral was supposed to be, light blue in the center, it became a very, very blue block. So I had to add my red in there somewhere. So I chose to do it in these little ones right here. And it gave me a chance to use that large scale floral. And then of course we have our background fabrics, and all of these are the same. I just put them in a little couple piles together for counting. So those are our 5 fabrics for block number 6. And so I think really it's just a matter of getting started putting this quilt top together. So let's take our fabrics over and we'll start putting our block number 5 together and see where we run into some issues. Here's my my tools. I'm ready to get started. And over here on the side, which is kind of hard for you to see, I have a little tiny cutting mat and a rotary cutter, because this block, both blocks, have a lot of stitch and flip. So we're going to use the stitch and flip quite a bit. And I have my iron over here too, so we can make it through this video. So the first step that we have in block number 5 is to put the corners together. That's usually what Shelley has us do, is start at the top of a block and move our way over to the center, almost like we're assembling the rows. So we're going to start with our corner blocks, and that means that we're starting with piece number F, which is going to be our background rectangles. And we're going to add to that an E square, and an E square is going to be, pretend our little floral here. So our fabric number 5 and our fabric number 4. And we're going to start with those, and we'll get these blocks together. So first thing we're going to do is take our F square, if I can get them apart, and we're going to add our E square. And you'll notice that the E square is shorter. It's not the same size. See how I have this little edge up here? That's okay. And we're going to stitch our parts from the side to the bottom, just like that. And sometimes I swap them around a little bit depending on where the needle is going to fall, because you got to be able to get your fabric in there. So come in here and get my point. And then I'm going to use my diagonal seam tape to sew down the back. If you don't have diagonal seam tape or you don't like it, you can always draw your line on the back of your block. So that is my first step, and I'm going to continue to do that to all 4 of these rectangles right here. I'm going to stitch, always putting the rectangle down, putting the block on the lower right hand side, and stitching from the side to the bottom of that rectangle. Okay, so in the way I'm strip piecing it here, I'm going to have to turn my rectangles a little bit because I'm strip piecing, but you get the gist. I'm always going to sew in that same direction, not deviating. All right, now that I'm done, I'm going to trim my little threads so I can take a look at my blocks. Before I cut everything, I want to make sure that they look exactly like the picture in the book, because I was flipping them all around. So they should look like this, so that your stitch and flip opens up like so. So let's make sure they're all correct, and your extra fabric is at the top, and it looks to me like they're all right. So now I'm going to press them and flip them out and cut the seam allowance behind the back, and we'll come back and do step 2. All right, they're all trimmed now, and now we're moving on to step number 2. And step number 2 is to take our H rectangles. So these are the right direction in one side and a little longer on the other side. So it's just how this particular block goes. So if you set this down on the corner, you see how it matches up on 3 sides, but it's a little longer on this side. That's exactly how we want to stitch it. So it's just a little longer on the left. Okay? So this is actually going to open up, and it's going to sit over here, and then we're going to put a little square in the center. So it's going to be the same angle that we're going to sew as we did on the top. So let's do that. Here we go. Just like that. And I'm going to continue doing my chain piecing here just to get these blocks done. So we're going to go ahead and continue to finish. All right, once these are chained piece, I'm going to cut them apart, and then we're going to make sure that the angles are going right before we cut them. That way I don't have to worry about wasting any fabric to have to make them again. So, yep, all my angles are going in the correct direction, and I have that little bit of extra fabric off onto the side. So now it's time to press them and cut out the background. So let's do that. Okay, those are all done now. They're over here on with our parts to our block, and now I have my piece C, which is that extra little part that goes right here in the center. So to get our step 3 done, what we're going to do is we're going to add a red square to the side of this piece, press those, and then add them to the top. And that's going to create the 4 corners that we need for our block. So let's get those done. Take our red square, put it on the side of our little triangle right here. Fits really nicely. We're always going to have that little piece right there. We're going to just chain piece them together with our 1/4 inch seam. Okay. Oops. I just saw a mistake. I see a little bit of selvage here when I was cutting. So I'm going to go grab another square and I'll be right back. There we go. We just will pretend that didn't happen. So it's funny, I did it on the first block. I saw it and I went back and looked at the other squares and never noticed the selvage, but I just saw it just now. And so if you don't sew it into your quilt and have to unsew it, it doesn't count, right? Okay, so now that these are done, I'm going to go ahead and press towards that red square because that will help to help this point here to flatten out. So let's go ahead and press those and we'll come back and add them to the top piece. All right, and I think it goes without saying, when you're making both blocks at the same time, you can see I've done this 4 times. I have 4 of these and 4 of these. If you're doing both blocks at the same time, you're going to have 8. So I just do half of it so I can make 1 block. You can see it. And then I go back and do the other half on camera. But you'll make 8 at the same time. So now this unit goes right on there like that. So I'm going to go ahead and pin these to the bottom here and then stitch them. So I'm going to make sure my corners line up and everything looks good. And then I'm going to go ahead and put it under the machine and stitch it. Then the first block, there it is right there. That is the corner. So we're going to go ahead and repeat this process. I'm going to do it 4 times. You're going to do it 8 times, and we'll have all the corners done for block number 5. All right. These can be cut apart, and then they'll all look like this, and we can set our corners aside. All right. Our step number 4, here's where we start getting into our backwards angles. So the first thing we're going to do, so for me, I have 1 block's worth of pieces here, and I'm going to go ahead and divide them 4 into 4. So you can go ahead and divide 8 to 8, set half of them aside. There's a reason. And we're going to put these up here, and then I'm going to just leave these like this. So the first thing I'm going to do, step 4, is these 4 rectangles are going to be sewn with the angles in one direction. And the other 4 that I set aside down here are going to be sewn in another direction. So we'll just keep them separate. That way we know when we run out of parts up here, we have to swap angles. So the first thing is we're going to take an E block, an E square, which is this guy right here. Actually, we'll move them that way so you can see them a little bit better. We're going to take one of these guys. And according to the instructions in the book, we're going to lay it down on the left-hand side of this rectangle. And we're going to stitch from the top, like a geese, from the top of the block to the bottom corner of the block. That's the angle we're doing. So let's do all 4 of those. All right, I'm done. I'm just going to check that I have sewn them all with the same angle that I see in the book. So if I lay them all down here and I know I'm going in this direction, that one's correct, and I can stop because I'm out of rectangles up here, right? So now that I know I've sewn them all in the right direction, I'm going to flip and stitch, okay? Flip them up and go ahead. We've already stitched, sorry. We're going to flip them up and we're going to press them and then cut out the bulk. All right, there they are, pressed and trimmed. So now the second step in step number 4 is to take the pieces we've already done. This is our unit. And we're going to take the other color, which is square number A, and we're going to lay it down on the right-hand side of the block. We are not making a goose, so we're not following ourselves coming this way. We're actually going in the same direction as that line right there. So I'm going to sew the top corner down to the bottom, or in this case, I like to start from the side, so I'll go this way. And I'll sew the angle, the same angle as this one, so it's hard to mess it up, okay? So we'll just put it under here, hope it starts sewing. This machine is very fussy. And we'll go all the way down to that bottom corner, okay? All right, so that's going to be the same for every single one of these, all right? So let's get that done. All right, I've gotten them all sewn. We'll cut them apart, and then we'll just make sure that every single one of my squares is sewn in the same direction as the other block, the other part that's on it. Okay, and assuming that's all correct, then I'm going to go ahead and flip and trim those, and my unit's going to look like just like that. Okay, let's do that. All right, friends, these units are done, and they look exactly like they're supposed to in the book. So that's step 4. We're going to set those aside for a moment, and we're moving on to step 5. And step 5 requires the other half of that stack of rectangles. So we're going to put it up here. The first step to take in step number 5, the first part, is to lay this down right like this. We're going to take our E, our floral fabric again, and I'm going to turn it on the left-hand side. And this time, I'm going to stitch in the opposite direction. So last time we went from the top center down to the bottom corner. This time, we're going to do the top corner down to the bottom center. So I'm actually going to go from here because I like not going from the pointed side. So I'm sewing like that. I'm going from the center out. So turn it around. And make sure this is lined up. It's just all of a sudden not lined up correctly. Let's get that lined up to make sure that it looks good when we're done. All right, we're doing the remainder of our rectangles and our E blocks the same exact way. So let's get those done. All right, that portion of step number 5 is done. I'm going to trim my little blocks apart. I'm also going to check them again. So remember, I wanted to go this way. Okay, they're all good. And I check that just to make sure that my angle is right before I flip it, press it, and cut out the bulk. Okay, that way I don't have to redo it. So let's do that. Oh, one thing that begs noting, over here by the side of my sewing machine, I have all of these. These are, and I keep cleaning them up and putting them in my little box. These are all of the triangles, the backing part that I keep cutting out when we do stitch and flip, and I cut them all out, and they're all patriotic fabrics. So something that I do periodically is I stitch them together, and I make little things like this. So this one just happens to be flying geese. This is a little piece of linen that I had left over in my stash. They are not neat and pretty. Can you notice that? They're not neat and pretty because every single one of these I didn't bother to restitch. I just sort of stitched them together. So I make them look pretty afterwards. And then I just take little random pieces of fabric that I have lying around and I put them together. And these are going to be little mug rugs. So they have a little backing on them. This is actually from another project that I was working on that's patriotic. And they wind up being little mug rugs. And so I have the arm on my couch that it's wide enough to set your coffee cup on, and I do it periodically, but I don't want to put it on the side of my couch in case there's drips on the cup. So I just make a bunch of these little mug rugs, and I have them on the furniture next to my dresser. And so my goal is to finish a bunch of these and have them sitting randomly all over the retreat center so people don't put their cups or their water bottles or anything on the furniture. So that's what I'm using all these for. So, it's not important, but in case you wanted to know what I do with all this leftover stuff. That's what I do with it. And I just do some janky looking stuff so that, you know, it's right about, I think let me check this. I think they're 5 inches by 9. They're like 5 by 9 or 4 by 8, which gives you a nice space for a mug and maybe a water bottle or something like that. So just a little thought. All right, now that we have one half of the block done, you may have already guessed, we're going to take these darker fabrics, these little A squares, and we're going to put them on the right-hand side of the block. And you may have already guessed it. Are we crossing ourselves? No, we're going to go parallel to our other line over here. So we're going to go ahead and stitch from this top down to the side corner. Okay. All right, we need to make sure that our stitching is going in the right direction. These look good. So you guessed it, we're going to press, flip, press, cut out the bulk. And you're going to have some squares left over. We'll set those aside for the next step. All right, those are done. These are our step 5 units. Let's bring back our step 4 units. Okay? Those two are going to go together to give us that kind of stripey type diagonal part block. And then this is step number 6, which we're going to put those together. And then at the top of them, we're going to add this little strip right here. So let's set those aside and we'll work on putting these guys together. So you're putting your 2 floral pieces together. They should come together in the center and be good to go. So let's stitch those together and then we'll add the top. All right, so step 6. When we are finished, I'm going to put these together as a chain piece, but when we're finished putting those two together, this is what the block looks like, or the unit. And I'm going to take them over to the iron and I'm going to open the seam. That's going to help reduce that bulk. So I'm going to open the seam, and that feels pretty good. And then we're going to add this little part to the top. So let me press this. There we go. And then we're going to add this little part to the top. And it probably begs mentioning again that if you pay attention to the book, that Shelley tells you which way to press all of your seams. I'm here to help you with that, but the instructions are there in the book. There's little tiny arrows next to each step. And of course, she tells you to go ahead and open this seam up just like I did. But even if you don't have me to tell you that, you can see it right in the book which way to press those seams so that everything comes out. There we go. I felt it. I felt it pop over that little thing and close back up again. So I just wanted to fix it. So if you follow the little arrows on which way to press, you'll have a much flatter and less bulky block than you would if you didn't. And then you're going to press that up. And that is going to be the finish unit. So when we go to put the blocks together, you're going to have your corner units and you're going to have that center unit right there. So the majority is going to be made up of those blocks. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this step 6 part and then we'll move on. Step number 7 is our last unit, and that's where those last little squares come from. And they're going to go on here making a square and a square. So we're going to have that stitch and flip again. So we'll layer one square on opposite corners. So side to side, right? Just like this. Side to side. So we're going to sew like that, stitch and flip them up, take out the bulk, do the opposite on the opposite diagonal. And then this guy will be complete and we'll be able to assemble the block. All right, just like that. We've stitched, we've flipped, we cut out the bulk, we'll do the opposite corners. All right, there we are. Block number 7 is done. So the last thing that we need to do is put the whole thing together. That is step number 8. And what we're going to do is we've got this block. Let's do it together in rows. this unit here and another corner, and we're going to stitch those together and then start on the middle row. So set that aside, lay these together, get to stitching. Okay, so on this block, Shelley says to press the seams out underneath the corners. So that's what we're going to do. And that finishes our top row. And our bottom row is exactly the same. So if you wanted to do 2 of these, or in your case, if you're doing 4 of these, you could do them the same. We'll just take one and turn it upside down to put it on the bottom of the block. So go ahead and finish those. All right, the last thing we need to do is we have our center block and we have our 2 of these right here. So we're going to put those together like so. And that's going to be our center row for this block. So let's go ahead and do that. So you'll see me use this purple thing, or in my case, mine is teal, but I want to start the block. I've got nice thin 2 pieces of fabric, and then I'm going to wind up with all this bulk right here. So I have 2 problems that are happening. I have this foot that sort of curls down like this. It always catches the lip of stuff. And then I have this bulk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down and I'm making sure that fabric stays under that foot. But if it doesn't, I can just lift the foot a little bit and make sure it stays under there. And then I'm taking my purple thing and making sure that it's going under the foot at the 1/4 inch seam so that when it comes up the other side, I don't have, you know, a gnarled up point or it doesn't kick out or something like that. And that's how I get the points to lay a little bit more crisp. Okay, so on this one, Shelley says to press it in. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to press those in. And we press the others out. And now to assemble the block, it's just rows. So top row, middle row, bottom row. So I'm just going to align these and stitch them together. And because we were so careful to press our seams in the right direction, I can go here into the center and pin to lock that part of the block. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. These should fit perfectly and the seams should lock together. So I'm going to go ahead and pin those at a diagonal. I'm always pinning them at a diagonal because I can come a 1/4 inch from the line and up here into the seam. That way I can put my needle down into that seam and pull the pin out without running over it. And once that's pinned, I can kind of look. We don't really have anything else that we need to align except for the ends. So I'm just going to go ahead and pin the ends so we know that they're even and they get started properly and we're not going to have any issues with the block when we get to the bottom. So we'll start again just like so. I am going to use my purple thing to make sure everything goes under the foot the way it's supposed to, because it is a little bit bulky. And sometimes they get caught, like right there. And then I'm just going to put my needle down in that seam, pull the pin out before I run over it, and then it should be pretty smooth sailing until we get to this other bulky point. Again, run up, put my needle in, pull the pin out before I run over it. Might have some issues right here, we'll see. See, there we go. See how that fabric kind of wants to grab up underneath that wonky foot? And that's the foot. It's just the angle of the foot, the way it works. I don't really care for it, but it is what it is. It's what I have today. And if you have a brother machine, you're going to have that same foot, that wonky foot. Oop, I managed to get it under there that time. There we go. And we're supposed to press this one out. So that'll get that one done. So all I need is the bottom row, and remember I made it just like the top row. So last time I sewed it on like that. It's not supposed to do that. You have to turn it around, and there it goes. So we'll go ahead and stitch this one or pin it to the bottom and stitch it down, and then we're done. Whew, wow, that was good. Look, I'm done. And man, this one felt a whole lot better than the first one. So I guess whatever adjustments I made to my 1/4 inch seam worked really well. So I'm going to put this one up here by its twin. All right, so now we've got those two done. Let's go back and work on our block number 6, which is our gentian block, which should go together pretty much about the same way. So in that section where we did our little angles on one side and then our angles on the other side, you have exactly the same thing in this block. So that's why I wanted them to go together, number 5 and number 6, because it's the same construction. And it just reminds you that you're sewing at those parallel angles rather than opposite angles. So we're going to do the same thing with this block. We have our same square and a square center. Same thing with the corners. We're just doing a simple corner block. And then we have our center strips here, which are going to be those angled pieces. So it's pretty close anyway to the same construction we did on this block with some minor changes. So let's go get that one done. All right, step number 1 of our gentian block starts with our D squares, which in my case are the little red ones. We're also going to need some of the same size square in our background, some background rectangles, and then our, in this case, our dark floral, which is our B squares, and these are our B squares, okay? So we have B squares, D squares, F squares, and our rectangles are E. The first row, so the first row and the third row of this border are going to be pretty much the same. I'm going to set these off to the side and we're going to kind of look at it. So it starts with, in my case, my red square. And that red square is going to have a rectangle on this side of it. Then I'm going to have a red square in the center here. And I'm going to have 2 backgrounds on either side of it, squares. And then I have this rectangle here. And the last piece is this guy. So that's exactly how they're going to assemble. So you can put them together any way you want. But once you attach your square to each side of the rectangle and then 2 squares on either side of your center square, you have your 3 rows together, and we can stitch that, and that creates your corner squares. And we're going to do that, well, you're going to do it, 8 times? I'm going to do it 4 times. Okay, so if you wanted to, you can stitch them all the same. So let's do that. I'm going to go ahead and stitch a red square to a rectangle, and I'm going to pull up all the rectangles that I need so I can stitch my red squares. I'll do all the top. You can do these all at the same time, all the top. And the reason I'm doing it in this way is because chain piecing is a little quicker because you're not cutting the thread every time. You're not wasting a lot of thread. So as much as I can, I'm going to go ahead and put these together as chain pieced, and then we can cut them all apart when we're done. All right, so I've done all 4, or in my case, you'll do 8, all 4 of that. Now I'm going to attach a red square to my square here. I'm only going to do one side of it because it's being chain pieced right now. All right, so you're going to take as many red squares as you have, and you're going to sew your background square to one side. I'm going to leave those attached. Now I'm going to sew all of my blue squares to one side of my rectangle. And right now what I have is, here's the remaining stack of rectangles. So I'm just going to keep sewing until all the rectangles are used. All right, that is all of my blue rectangles. Now I'm going to kind of pull up the back here, and I'm going to trim out right here. I'm leaving those there just so you can see. and I'm pulling out all of the little squares. There's all the little rectangles that are red. I'm going to cut these guys apart. And then before I cut the whole thing, I'm going to open it back up and put another background square on the opposite side. Cool, huh? Make sure you sew it to the side of the colored square, not the other background. I was about to do that. I could feel it in my bones. All right. So now all our chain piecing is done. We can cut our thread. And these are going to be our centers right here. The one with the one square. Oops. Forgot to cut that off. Then we have all of our little blue square strips and our little red square to rectangle. Cut those apart. And then what I'm going to do is look in the book and check the arrows to press. So in the book, it shows basically you're pressing all your seams under the color. So for the red ones, I'm going to press the seams to lay underneath. So like that, out towards the red. I'm going to do the same thing for the blue. They're going to go out towards the blue. And then when I get to this guy in the center, the seams are going to go underneath the red. So they're going to get pressed to the center. So they're under like that. And that will make sure that all these pieces get to nest when we go to put them together. So let's go do our pressing. All right, now we have our 3 sections together. So now all we have to do is assemble these into corners. So you can see my seam here is pressed under to the red, and then you can see these seams are pressed to the red. So the first thing to do is to attach these, and I have this one little area right here that's going to nest, okay? So you can pin it if you'd like, okay? And then we're just going to stitch it. Now you can stitch all of row 1 and row 2s together and then stitch the blues on the bottom, the row 3 on the bottom, or you can just do this section by section. I think what I'll do is just sew one of them for you so you can see it. And then all Shelley says to do is when you open it up, just press it up. So we'll do that. So that's pressed up, and then I'm going to add my part to the bottom, which is real easy because again, it's been pressed toward the blue, so that's going to nest really nicely. And you can put a little pin in there if you want so that it stays looking really nice and even. And we'll just stitch it. It's pretty on the back as it is on the front. So we're just going to press it up. There it goes. So that's going to be our corner. And I'm going to go ahead and finish stitching all of these so I can finish all the corners. And then we'll move on to step 2. All right, step number 2, I have these beautiful fabric A rectangles. They're long and skinny. And then I have my fabric B. Remember I said it was super close to that color. And then I have my F squares, this is my background squares. So the first thing that Shelley says to do, I'm going to do this 4 times. I think you're going to do it 8. But I'm going to take, just like I did last time, I'm going to set half the rectangles below, because I want to get into the habit of sewing these correctly. So I'm going to take my rectangle and an F square or a background square, and I'm going to put that down on the left-hand side of the block. And then I'm going to stitch from the top of the block down to the bottom corner, okay? And I'm going to do that for each one of my 4 rectangles that I have here, okay? So let's do that. All right, once these are done, obviously I'm going to cut them apart. And I'm also, same as we did with the other block, I'm going to make sure that all of my seams are going in the direction of the book, that the book states, before I do any flipping and cutting. So now that I know that they're okay, I'm going to flip them all up, press them, and cut out the bulk. All right, all those pieces are done. And my next step is to take the rectangle that I have, and I'm going to lay my star fabric down on the opposite side of the block. And guess what? We're making one of those diagonal strips again. So we're going to run parallel. So in the book, where I'm going is from here to here because that's what's parallel, the upper corner to the bottom. Okay, I'm going to turn it around because my machine doesn't like corners, but we're going in the same direction. Okay, this old machine just loves eating points off of triangles. So if I give it, you know, a rectangle to grab onto, it's less likely to do that. I'm not going to say it won't. It'll make a liar out of me. All right, now they're all done. I'm checking to make sure that's the angle that I want and that they're all that same direction. Since I kept spinning them around, when they're right, I'm going to flip, press, cut out the bulk. All right, there they are done. That's how it's supposed to look like in the book. And then if you read ahead or you are just super intelligent, you're going to figure out what we're going to do next, which is the other side of that. So we're going to set these aside, get out our remaining rectangles, okay? And we're going to start with our square on the left side of a rectangle. This time, we're going to sew from the top corner down to here. We're doing opposite of what we did before. So I'm going to take and stitch from here out to that outer corner. And that is the angle we're going to do. So all 4 rectangles exactly the same. All right, check your blocks. Make sure that all of your lines are going in the right direction. Mine are, so we're going to flip, press, cut out the back. All right, the second half of our step 3 is to put our star squares down on the other side. And then I bet you can guess which direction we're stitching in. Just like that. We're going parallel to the other point. So now that we have our cream colored part or our background parts on, we know exactly how to sew our other part. Okay. You guys let me know how you like chain piecing these and whether that is a helpful thing to learn or if it's something that you do, or if you do them little individual parts by part, or, you know, do you sew each corner together, or do you, get all the parts ready first, or how do you like to piece? Personally, I like to use the least amount of thread, the least amount of cutting. I want to just get it all done. So it's part of the organization in my brain, which is do all the things, do all these things, and then do all these things. It's kind of like the efficient way to create any product is by doing all of step 1 and then all of step 2. I just wondered what kind of quilter you are. Once we make sure that we're going in the correct direction, which I'm fairly certain we are, we're going to flip, press, cut out the bulk, and then finish up that step. All right, there we go. We've got all of step 3. So here's our step 3 units. Here's our step 2 units. So you can guess, we're going to put these 2 together. That is step 4. We're going to put a 3 unit or a 2 unit and a 3 unit together, press them down, or do it right down the center here, stitch them, and then we're going to press those seams open. If you slow down when you get to the bulk, it'll keep your machine from sort of kicking out your blocks and making them all wonky. So it's just a little thought. So just, you can zip through your blocks. I'm a pretty fast piecer usually, but I just know that if I get up here and I try to go too fast, it's just going to make a big old mess. So just go slow. Get over that part and then speed up a little bit. And then when I get down here to the bottom, I'm just going to slow back down again so I can have an opportunity to go over those parts without making a mess. All right, I'm cutting all these little guys apart, and then I'm going to press the seam open. So I'm going to just open it up like this and press it open, okay? Okay, there they are. These are my center units. They're all ready to go, and I'm going to work on our last unit. So as we did with the center of block 5, block 6 is much the same. It is a square and a square unit, so we're stitching and flipping that. So we're going to stitch our background squares, or in this case, the last 4 squares that are going to go around that center. We are putting them in opposite corners of that square. We're going to stitch from side to side, side to side, and then open them, press them, cut out the bulk, and do the opposite 2 corners. All right, there we go. There's our center. So now we get to, in our step number 6, we get to assemble our blocks. There we go. So setting my center aside here, we're going to go with, let's see, 2 of these, 1 of these. So the top row that we have is going to look like this, with this unit in the center and this unit on the bottom. That's our top row. It's also our bottom row. So I'm going to go ahead and assemble the top and the bottom row because it's easy. I'm going to check Shelley's arrows to see which way we're supposed to press, because we do definitely want to lock our seams. Makes it look nice and neat. And for this row, we're going to go out. We're going to press the seams out towards the corners. So we'll do that. And I'm going to make 2 of these. And then our center row is going to be a little skinnier. So it's going to have the parts look like this. There's our center block, and our 2 side pieces just turn sideways. So to remember to put those together, we're going to turn it sideways, lay it down and stitch it. Remember, it's really bulky underneath there. Make sure it stays down. All right. And then these seams are going to press in. Okay. So let's press those in. And now we assemble like a little mini quilt. So here's our top. Here's our middle. Just like so. Let's get that pinned up. And now that we've pressed it properly, we're going to have some nesting seams. All right, this one's going to press out. So we're going to press out towards the outside of the block and add the bottom. Make sure that your last row is going in the right direction. So if you did it exactly like the top row, it should be upside down. All right, friends, we got our second one done. Look at that. Awesome. So I'm going to pin it up next to its friend. So there we have it. Block number 5, block number 6. We're all done with June's part of the flower farm. What are we doing next time? So I have it all here in my handy dandy chart. Next month in July, we're going to be working on block number 7 and block number 8. These are going to be a little more involved than the pieces before. So they are still 16-inch blocks. But we have a lot of smaller pieces. So also, if you haven't had an opportunity to do so, you're going to want to go to, before our July video, you're going to want to go to, it's C&T Publishing. And what I will do is I'll make sure there is a link in the description box of the video. You're going to want to go out to the C&T Publishing site, into their errors page for the Flower Farm block of the month, and you're going to want to print out the correction page for block number 8, because there is a correction page. So 2 things that you want to do for next time for July, aside from having all your fabrics ready and everything like that, is make sure you print the correction page for the Shelley Cavanna book for Flower Farm. And you're going to want to make sure, if you haven't already done so, that your 1/4 inch seam is set properly. So if you haven't done so yet, if you're just kind of winging it and figuring, oh, it'll go together just fine. When we get into block 7 and block 8, you're going to want to give yourself a little bit more time, because it's a lot more pieces in this particular block. So I have them listed as a little bit difficult. They are somewhat similar, and they just have a lot of little parts. So I think, let's see here. We're at M. So the parts go from A to M on one of the blocks, and from A to L on another one of the blocks. So I think for everything that we've done so far, We're usually somewhere between A and F or A and G. We haven't really hit a lot of tiny parts yet. When we start getting further down the alphabet, that's how you know there's just a lot more parts. So you want to be ready for that. So if you found these to be somewhat simple, they're not super hard. You do have to pay attention to those little sections right there, but otherwise the pieces are nice and big. They go together pretty quickly. This should be, I haven't checked yet, but this would be a super short video. So catch up with your stuff, because next month you're going to want to take a little bit more time to work on those. And I will see you back here the third week of July, which will be filmed early because I have a retreat on the third week of July. So I won't be filming that week. I will definitely have to do that one ahead of time. So thank you guys so much for joining me. Do let me know how you like the chain piecing, how you like the videos. Go ahead and comment. If you haven't done so already, like and subscribe. There's great stuff on this channel. If you haven't had time to go back and look at the playlists and everything, you should do so. So catching you up with our normal stuff, please like and subscribe. I know there's like 90% of you or 80% of you are not subscribed to the channel, although you're watching, and I really appreciate you watching. But go ahead, we want to get those numbers up. I want to do another giveaway. I did a giveaway, I think when we hit 5,000 or when we hit 10,000, and I'm going to do it again when we hit 20,000. So I'm really excited. I want to do a giveaway real bad. So if you share this with your friends, tell your friends, join the Quilt-Along. I know that some of you are picking up with the Quilt-Along a little bit late because I have been getting emails from some of you. So check that out. There's other content. If you hadn't had a chance to download our weekend jelly roll project, you definitely want to do that. So check out the videos for that and the links for that. Also, you know, we have fabric coming in all the time on our online store. So that's a good place to go, cabinquilters.com. That's also where you can find info on our retreats and also info on the upcoming quilt cruise. That's listed on the retreat page. We also have a landing page, but that quilt cruise is coming up January of 2027. There's also space in our 2027 quilt therapy retreats, so we'd love to have you come along. There may even be 1 or 2 spots this year, so do check and look at some of the retreats that we have going on this year because we have some classes. Next year is all about quilt therapy. I'm very excited about that, and some of our smaller project ideas, which I think you'll really like. And of course, our quilt cruise is going to Panama and a bunch of other places. Bahamas, Aruba, Cayman, Colombia. It's going to be great. So you can see both me and Moose, both Moose and Squirrel on that trip. And the owners the owner of Quilting Essentials and More in Warrenton, Virginia. So she's our sponsor on that cruise. So I'm really excited to go with Angie. You're going to love her. And what's the last thing? Oh, Moose and Squirrel. Go ahead over to YouTube, type in Moose and Squirrel Quilters. Check out our, I guess you'd call it a vlog or a video podcast or a podcast on YouTube where Moose and I and maybe some guests talk about some really fun things about quilting. And it's a fun conversation, just a really fun conversation. So we'll hope you check it out. Until next time, and I've got some good content coming up too. Until next time, I hope that you're making lots of progress with your flower farm, and I'll see you back here on the channel in the next one.